I just thought I'd update you on the activities of the Scottish Government's Emergency Response Unit, which has been meeting all day. Basically, in summary, I contacted both Unite and INEOS this morning. I spoke to Jim Ratcliffe, the owner of INEOS. I spoke to Phil McNulty, the General Secretary of Unite, and urged the resumption of negotiations between Unite and INEOS. The only real solution to the current dispute is to do it by negotiation. It's going to have to be resolved at some point. That is the only real solution to prevent damage and inconvenience to the people and economy of Scotland. That refers both to upstream through the Forties pipeline and downstream in terms of petrol and DERV supplies to Scotland. Supplies are flowing across the country. There are localised difficulties, particularly on diesel, and in that light BP are releasing from the substantial stocks they hold at Grangemouth the diesel which should help ease the supply problems in various localities. It should also be noted that there are substantial, enormous quantities of product, both particularly of diesel, which are inbound from a variety of European destinations, which will be arriving, which have more than enough supply for next week in Scotland, from Rotterdam, from Gothenburg and from other ports. Thirdly, the Scottish Government ministers and staff and throughout the public sector are being urged to behave responsibly in the current position, to reduce our own fuel consumption, stopping avoidable journeys, using public transport. The behaviour will be led by the ministerial team. I've been enjoying walking around Edinburgh over the last couple of days. I'm sure it's going to do me a great deal of good, and I'll be on the train to Inverurie at some point this evening. But that responsible behaviour we'd like to see taken part by, certainly throughout the public sector in Scotland, indeed by all members of the community. I spoke to John Hutton, the Secretary of State for Trade and Industry, about these and other matters earlier on this afternoon. We are very much in agreement. He is not invoking the emergency powers that he holds, both in terms of distribution and in terms of rationing. DeBar are the only organisation who can ration supplies, and I think people should bear that in mind in terms of how they respond to difficulties. It's not always helpful. In fact, it can in some cases be unhelpful to put very low limits on petrol purchases. If the Secretary of State for Trade and Industry thought it was required to ration supplies, then that's indeed what he would be doing. In terms of the government emergency response, the response to a variety of positions has been extremely effective. And over the last couple of days, for example, there have been various reports about shortages in Calmac and Lothian buses and other organisations, many of which weren't reported, but some of which were. These issues have been dealt with quickly and effectively within minutes of the problem arising, and that has been the work of David Wilson, the Coordinator for Energy, and the other officials who have been working over the last week. And with that, gentlemen, I think we're very open indeed to questions.